Welcome to Charts Today. It is Thursday, the 9th of July, and we start by looking at a short-term chart of Brent crude oil. And we had upside targets that have been met. Pattern looking very toppy here. This is the 60-minute chart, remember, and we've got a downside target. And that's really quite interesting, given that we are seeing news flow coming out of the Middle East of increased tensions with Iran and the US bombing each other. And the interesting thing is that the price is actually falling when you would expect that to have a big impact on the price. And often the case that charts preempt the news. And so this run up in price was before the tension, and now we're seeing, whilst we are in the tension, that we've got a mixed picture. In fact, we went out as neutral today to clients on gas and power. We send that out to our energy clients in the morning, first thing, and we can see that European energy markets are mixed, and in fact, gas prices are recovering as we speak. So it's quite interesting, but we've set a neutral day on the basis that we are pulling back. So what is the impact of that on other markets? Well, you would, as you would expect, stocks haven't enjoyed this. And if we look at the Nasdaq, this is the cash Nasdaq, the actual index. We can see here these downside targets. We saw a high point in the beginning of June, and we've struggled ever since, despite there being effectively a truce in the Middle East. And this was the rise in the market on the hope of a deal. And now we're just seeing that euphoria dissipating, and the key thing is now, will the Nasdaq break higher or will it break lower? And so we will look at indices in a minute. Looking at the dollar index, that's the short-term chart. We've just struggled to activate this upside target. The medium term, we do have an upside target, but the range isn't clear, and on the long-term chart, we are still below the clouds. So the dollar is remaining mixed. And interestingly, if you look at a currency like the Chinese yuan, you see here just how the dollar was buying 7.5 yuan. Now it's buying was down as low as 6.75. So that's quite a significant fall between the two biggest economies in the world. And of course, the Japanese yen has been another one to watch. A lot of people talking about the short on the yen. We need to break that 162.70 level really to see those levels breaking. This is, of course, dollar rising, yen falling, dollar buying more yen. So that would be the yen short that a lot of people have been talking about. And looking at sterling, we are seeing that climbing against the dollar on the short term. There is an upside target to 134. So dollar weakness, sterling strength is quoted the other way around, of course. So Bitcoin is another one where we are seeing a little bit of recovery on the short term, but realistically, the daily chart is very bearish, and the weekly chart also bearish with a downside target to 40,000. So that's really quite a key factor. Now, the other thing, of course, is bond yields. And I know I talk about this quite a lot, but the Japanese bond yield, again, is climbing. And we're seeing that nudging 290s, 287.50 as we speak. Looking at the short term, those targets were given. We've risen in the last few days from 2.6% in the last week or two to 2.9%. That's a massive difference for Japan, which is the most indebted country in the world. So that is certainly something to watch on our screens. And when we hit 3%, which looks like we will, that is going to become quite big news for the global economy. We are seeing the S&P future up this morning, up 0.31%, the Nasdaq future up 0.6%. We'll look at the individual stocks in a minute, but it does suggest we're going to open a little bit higher today. UK market is down, looking quite subdued on that short-term chart. The daily chart, we are stuck in a range. Since the March high, had a very nice trend up until March, but we have been going sideways. That's the market that we're in. The DAX did actually manage to break, just touch a new high, but hasn't managed to hold on to it. So this is still a sideways market as well. And we're seeing Japan actually rising in a steady trend on that weaker yen, Japanese companies in profits increasing. We saw the Shanghai index bounce yesterday. That was quite interesting last night, overnight, but we do have downside targets and we are below the cloud. But that 3950 level seems to be a level that Chinese investors are watching, and the Sensex has actually started an ascent off that 73,500 level. So that is starting to look a little bit better with an upside target that has been activated, and another one would be activated if we can break above 79,500. So that's going to be certainly key to watch. That last target is to the top of the level that we saw previously, so we wouldn't be surprised to see resistance there. Looking at the Aussie market, it's a case of which way do we break. That's the medium term chart. The short term chart, we are seeing some fall away. Looking at some other things, sugar is one we've talked about quite often. That's got upside targets now to levels not seen for a while, 16 and 17. So that's good news, but the medium term, we are bullish above the cloud, but we need to break above that 16 level to deactivate that downside target. And we look at the long-term chart, similarly, we need to break 1610 to deactivate that downside target. It would only be 1750 when we could start to say that we are in a new trend. But the short term is looking promising there. Gold. I've talked about this a bit recently. We are stuck in a range between 4,000 and 4,200. And the key thing is we've got a new upside target. We've got mixed targets. We've got a new upside target suggesting back to that 4,200 level. Looking at the daily chart, we can see we have met that downside target, still bearish below the cloud there, and really we've got to break that 4,200 level. Silver is trading in a range between 57 and 63. Got to break that level as well. Big news is SpaceX. And that's really quite key. We are holding below that 150 IPO level, not bouncing there. That is a bit of a concern for SpaceX investors. We've got targets into the 130s. That's going to leave a lot of people who've invested in tech feeling a bit beaten up. Apple struggling to make a new high there on the chart, which is quite interesting. And if we look at Amazon, we were down 1% yesterday, again, away from the peak. Google, Alphabet has been falling away. A lot of these tech stocks not looking great. Microsoft looking terrible. Downside target met. Remember, that's bearish confirmation. If we go to the daily chart, another big downside target and a big level. If we look at the long-term weekly chart on Microsoft, that 344 level, we break that. That is not good news, but we are bearish below the cloud on the weekly, bearish below the cloud on the daily, and we are just still holding above the cloud on the 60-minute chart. But the trends are not with Microsoft. Meta is a bit of a mixed picture at the moment. And if we look at Nvidia, they were up nearly 4% yesterday. So that's quite key. And Tesla down 2%. And on the short-term chart, we do have a big downside target there. 370 is a level we need to hold. If we look at Nvidia, if we look at the medium-term chart for Tesla, watch for a break in either direction. Nasdaq, we saw yesterday the performance was in chips again. Baker Hughes is energy related, but Broadcom, Seagate, all of these stocks up around 4%. NXP up 4%. So we are seeing some strength there. Nvidia, we already talked about. Western Digital. So we have seen Texas Instruments, chips really holding on. On the other end of the scale, it was the software companies. We saw Airbnb have given upside targets, but just struggling to break to the downside there. Intuit really looking at an awful chart still below the cloud there. Last of all, a quick look at the UK market. And today, the performance is sitting in the in banks and resource stocks. And so that's really going to be quite key. We are seeing here some quite key moves, waiting to see if we activate targets, but do watch those. Fresnel, actually a resource stock that was up, but the chart looks terrible with downside targets. That's it for today. Keep an eye on those price targets and the trends. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.